chose my lover over our family. Now 5 years later, he acts like I don't exist. Hello, Redditors. My name is Anna, and I'm 39 years old. I've been away from my family for 5 years. It was something I couldn't exactly control. I thought that I had to leave. I didn't think it would take me 5 years to get back to them, or that Ted will never come back for me. I thought he would fight for me and never let me leave that day. But I'm back now. I'm back, but no one will accept me. Ted acts like I don't even exist, and he's refusing to let me see our kids too. I've tried everything to get him to forgive me and let me back into the house, but Ted is absolutely ignoring me, and I don't know what to do anymore. I know that it's all my fault, but trying to fix something that nobody is letting you fix is just totally awful. I chose my lover over our family. Hear me out first before you blame me. It wasn't my fault originally. Ted and I had the most beautiful wedding. It was literally the talk of our little town, with everyone knowing everyone. I married quite early at the age of 21. Ted was 23 at the time when we got married. It was the talk of the town not because it was the most elite wedding, but because of how young we were. In fact, it was the most simple wedding, with my gown borrowed from Ted's mother, who used it for her own wedding. I just had to do a little adjusting, and we were good. Ted and I were so in love, and we couldn't wait to get married, despite the little opposition from my father. Ted was a farmer, and although he had basic knowledge, he didn't go to college and became a farmer just like his dad was when he was alive. He helped manage and control the business on his father's large commercial land. Ted wasn't poor, not at all. He was quite wealthy, and even though his family was into farming, they did quite well for themselves because of how many people they supplied produce to. My father had opposed the wedding at first because of how young I was, and he was scared that I was going to regret my decision, but I didn't. I never did. And I didn't think, even after leaving with Mario as I had done, that I did regret marrying Ted and giving birth to our beautiful 2 kids. Life with Ted was definitely the best. Ted never treated me like I was too young, and he always ensured he listened to me, got my opinion on things. And he was so caring, kind, and patient with me. Ted's mom was always kind to me. She lived with us for the first 3 years of our marriage, but when I grew uncomfortable with it, Ted told her to go back to her place, and she never objected. She was understanding and left us alone to build our family the way we wanted to. After giving birth to our kids, Ted wanted me to go to college, but I refused. I didn't want to go. I never wanted, and so I refused to. I loved being married, and I loved being a housewife and taking care of our kids. It was my duty, and I loved doing it. But over the years, something changed, something that never needed to just change. It was Ted, and it wasn't the kids. Ted was still the same loving and understanding husband, despite the years that had passed, and he still took care of me like he had done from the beginning. We definitely had our differences, but when we argued, Ted always made sure we settled everything before the next day. He would apologize when it isn't even his fault, just to make peace. The kids were growing up into these beautiful teenagers that were becoming independent of their mom. They didn't want me doing certain things that I did for them before. They wanted to go out, hang out with friends, and be free. They were like their father, who enjoyed reading despite the fact that he never went to college. He was quite versatile. He and the kids had this time every weekend that they shared what they learnt from a book their father would recommend they finished within the week. It was their bonding time. But something changed over the years, and I only got to notice it after 13 years of being married to Ted. I was becoming this unhappy person in my marriage, and I couldn't pinpoint the reason why. It was something that had been happening before that year, but I just kept dismissing the feeling. I told myself I was just being paranoid. There was no reason not to be happy with a loving husband like Ted and beautiful kids like my children. But the feeling, instead of going away, just grew stronger. Perhaps it was that one time I was invited to another town by my friend from high school who wanted us to gather for a reunion. I was very excited to go, and I even bought a very expensive dress with matching jewelries, a bag, and shoes. I was happy that I was going to connect with people I haven't seen in years, and it was going to be amazing. But when I got there, I felt so stupid for feeling excited. Seeing all of them in their expensive suits and the ladies in their obviously expensive dresses. Even though mine was also expensive and was from a popular brand, I still couldn't help but feel less of myself. And while they talked, I kept mute, except I was being spoken to. I couldn't exactly say anything. I didn't know half of what they talked about. Most of them were speaking about life after high school, where they went to and where they've traveled to and how well things were going with them. Things were going well with me too, but it still didn't make me feel good. They all looked like they've gotten the chance to explore the world, while I just sat back in the same hometown, breeding babies and becoming a housewife. I never explored, I never got to experience the outside world. And even though I was desperate to get married to Ted before, I became really sad that I didn't wait a while and see whether that was the life I wanted for myself. After the reunion, I started to question myself to see what exactly I had achieved. There was no exact thing I achieved besides just being my kid's mother and Ted's wife. At least Ted got to expand his business from where his father stopped. He was now the major supplier to 2 different big towns, and he traveled a lot now because of his other farm in another town that he had to supervise. The kids had also grown, and they didn't depend on me like they did in the first 6 years of their lives. I was practically useless. I had nothing to do, and I felt like I had no one to talk to, and I just kept getting even more depressed. Ted never noticed, and the kids didn't either. Maybe because I was so good at hiding what I felt. In front of them, I was the same loving wife who cooked their meals and sat with them at the table, smiling at their little arguments while they ate. I was still the same wife that laid on her back every time that Ted wanted the pleasure and would even moan in response to his touches. I was still that same woman who had been in love with him at 19 to Ted. Nobody knew how I really felt, not even my friends. I kept it all to myself because of how ungrateful I felt for feeling that way despite Ted's hard work to make the kids and I have the best lives. But then, something very odd had happened during our 14th year of being married. I was still the same, even worse. I still felt very unhappy, but was still keeping everything to myself. But Ted had told me he needed to hire a manager, especially at the farm in our town, because it was already obviously too big for him alone to handle. The other farm still needed only his attention, and he was so scared of hiring someone there. He wanted to take care of things himself there until the farm was able to run itself effectively, just like the one back at home could. It meant he would be away from home more so he could focus on building that farm to his satisfaction, while the manager would run things at the farm at home, and I understood that. I wanted to suggest he hire me, but I know Ted would be surprised, and he would begin to suspect my unhappiness. There was also the fact that I was rubbish at farm work. I didn't even know the difference between each seed except the vegetables I used for cooking. I would definitely do a nonsense job, and I knew Ted would never want to tell me that. I didn't want to destroy our means of income, so I just agreed with him to hire a qualified help for the job. That was how Mario came into the picture. Mario was apparently the most qualified person for the job. He grew up on a farm and had even studied a plant-related course, and he was looking to grow his knowledge vastly on commercial farming. It was what he told Ted and I when he came for the interview, and I was the one who convinced Ted that he was the man for the job. Ted hired him because I wanted him to. It wasn't because of his qualifications I wanted him hired, though. I was drawn to Mario for some reasons, and I didn't know why, so I guess I wanted to figure it out. A week after Mario had been hired, Ted started traveling again. He had only stayed behind that week to teach Mario the ropes, and he wanted to make sure he was a capable hand before leaving. And when he was assured that he was, he traveled and left Mario to handle things. Like I wrote before, I wanted to figure why I was drawn to Mario, and so I started to seek him out. Whenever I cooked, I brought him food on the farm. He stayed in the boys' quarters built behind our home, and he was always the first to get to the farm before any of the other workers did. I got up early to make breakfast for the kids, too, so I always got to watch him through my kitchen window, preparing for work. And then when the kids had left for school, I would seek him out and give him breakfast. Mario and I started first with little conversations. Just the regular discussion about the farm, and then it was about Ted and how he worked, and then the kids. Mario was the first person to observe how unhappy I was. He told me that afternoon when he had come into the house when I invited him in before the kids arrived from school. He told me that I wasn't happy and that I was only pretending to. He was the first person to see through my facade, and it made me even more drawn to him. So every morning after his supervising job on the farm, he would come in the house and would sit with me and we would talk. I told him about the reunion, and I told him how stupid I felt for feeling that kind of way, especially with a man like Ted, and he assured me that I was right to feel that way. He told me that Ted didn't cherish me because if he did, He would notice what it only took him 2 weeks of knowing and talking to me to do. Somehow our conversation started to have a switch. We would start our conversations with Ted, but somehow it would switch into Enos's matter, and Mario would tell me just how much he wished he was the one married to me. It made my heart skip beats, but I would laugh it off as a joke. Mario was almost 8 years younger than me, so it was ridiculous he would think that. But it didn't stop me from wishing that was the case. Then there was the way he would touch my hair when we sat close together, the way he would hold my hands and rub it, the way he would look at me with those two very dark eyes, like he was staring at my soul, the way he spoke to me with that accent of his. I started to crave more than just the conversations we had, and eventually it had happened as I hoped. That day, the kids weren't going to come home in the afternoon like they usually did. They were spending the afternoon and then the night at Tiffany's place. She was hosting the kids for their pajamas party, and she had asked me prior that day, and I agreed to it. Tiffany was a good mother, and I knew she would take care of the kids, so I was home all alone throughout that day. Mario had not even come to keep me company, like he would usually do in the afternoons, because it was harvest season and they were busy on the farm. I spent the day imagining silly things like spending a night in Mario's arms. I tried to dismiss the thoughts, but they kept coming in stronger each time until I could no longer resist when I couldn't sleep at night. I went to seek Mario. I went out through the kitchen door, and when I knocked on his door, it was as if he was waiting for me to come. He allowed me in, and without a word between us, he kissed me, and I kissed him back. From then, there was no limit to what we did to each other, touching and kissing like we've never been touched and kissed by another. Mario and I slept together that night, and I went back into the room I shared with my husband and laid in bed with different aching spots on my body, which surprisingly felt good. For the first time in 2 years at that time, I felt like I was truly happy. I didn't think it was the sex. I thought it was all Mario. He made me happy, and I thought that was all I needed. I squashed the feeling of guilt and replaced it with the feeling of ecstasy I got from being with Mario, and that feeling got stronger each time Mario and I slept together. Sometimes I was brave enough to sleep in his room through the night so we could have plenty of sex, and then I would sneak back into the house when it was morning to make breakfast for the kids. When Ted came visiting, I was irritated by his presence instead of being glad. It meant I couldn't spend my time with Mario until he left, and I waited eagerly for him to leave, and that didn't happen until a week had passed. I didn't let Ted touch me for 3 whole days, and when I realized he was beginning to suspect every time I had the excuse of being too tired, I slept with Ted. But it wasn't the same as Mario. His touch felt wrong, and his body's weight on mine while he did what he was doing down there felt like a huge load instead of the nice weight I've always thought it was. Ted had a huge stature and was taller and huge than Mario, so I felt like the air was being sucked out of me when he came on me and kissed me and touched me the way he did. But I pretended to like it. I had to. I didn't want him suspecting anybody, especially Mario. I didn't want him to send Mario away because of how happy he made me. Finally, I concluded in my heart that I was in love with the two men. The years that had been between Ted and I as a married couple couldn't exactly be replaced, and I knew despite the way I felt about sex with him, I still loved him. And I convinced myself that what I felt with Mario wasn't just lust, it was love. And besides, Mario told me all the time that he loved me, especially when we were in bed naked together. Months after Mario had become my lover. Mario suggested something that was absolutely ridiculous, but the more he said, the more it began to make sense to me. Mario wanted the both of us to run away. He said he didn't want to share me with Ted anymore, and that he didn't like it when Ted kissed me in front of him, or held me the way he did in front of him, whenever Ted came visiting. He told me that he wanted to freely love me and touch me just the way Ted could, and he knew we couldn't do that in my hometown because it would ruin me. He wanted us to run away and be together forever. But the problem was where we were going and how we were going to survive there. Mario wanted me to steal money from Ted so we could use it to get a fresh start and also start a new life together. I didn't like the idea, but Mario convinced me again, and we proceeded to try and steal the money. With the kind of money we needed to make an escape and also start a new life, I knew that asking Ted would make him suspicious, even though I knew that Ted had that kind of money and more too. Taking the amount of money we needed wouldn't cause any dent to his wealth, but we had to steal it, not ask, so I could run away with Mario. So we made a document, well, Mario did, and gave it to me to find Ted's seal and tried to get his signature so we could forge it, and then we would be able to get away with the money. The problem was Ted had always been a rather meticulous person, and he was so thorough too. He kept his things and never forgot where he kept them, and he was so organized, it usually made my head hurt whenever I had to get anything from his library or the side of the wardrobe. Yes, I have always been scatterbrained and never knew where things were, and you would think an organized space would help me get things, but it was quite the opposite. Although Ted never hid much from me, and I had always known that his seal was usually in his library, and the key was always with him. So the plan was to get the keys while he was asleep and get the seal on the document. I must have acted suspicious all day because of how nervous I was, but Ted said nothing. He even pretended like he didn't see the way I kept fidgeting, waiting for him to fall asleep. When he finally did fall asleep, I removed the key I needed amongst his bunch of keys and went to the library to open it. Searching for the seal took a while longer than I hoped, and when I finally got it and used it on the document that Mario had given me, Ted asked me if that's what I needed all along. I was so frightened when I heard his voice behind me. He had only pretended to fall asleep, but wasn't asleep, and had been standing behind me the whole time while I looked for the seal. I wanted to come up with a lie, but I couldn't think of anything. Ted snatched the document out of my hand, and when he studied it, his face scrunched up. Apparently, it was a document signing the amount of money Mario and I needed to make our escape, and the money was apparently supposed to be transferred to Mario's account. I never read the document before. I didn't think I needed to check it because Mario had assured me that I didn't need to worry about anything. So long I got the seal and his signature. Ted asked me why I needed that sort of money for Mario, and why I needed to sneak around to get it. Instead of pleading, I got angry. I hated the tone he was speaking to me in, like I was some thief, even though it was exactly what I was doing, but I didn't like it. He made me seem like a little conniving snake, and I hated it so much that I snapped. I told him that I needed it as an escape from him and everyone else. I told him that I was in love with Mario, and that I was going to leave with him, and I told him that the money was supposed to be compensation for being married to him for 14 years, and that I was entitled to it. Ted looked at me in anger, and then he finally asked me one question. He asked if that was what I wanted to do, and I didn't think it through before saying yes. Ted looked at me again and told me that if he was going to relinquish the money, he never wanted to see me again around him or our kids, and I agreed, too eager to get the money, and then Ted brought out a pen and signed the documents and gave them to me. Mario and I left that night, and I thought I was making the right decision, not knowing I was making the greatest mistake of my life. The first year with Mario and all that money was great. We didn't rent an apartment or anything. We spent the time moving from one hotel to another and enjoying our lives. The second year, the money was finishing up, but Mario had been able to get a good bet and won us more money, in addition to what we had left, so we decided to buy an apartment and stay in for the time being. I thought that was all we needed to be happy, but guess I was wrong. Because within the third year of being with Mario, I noticed that he spent more time out than he did with me inside the house. When I complained to him, he would dismiss my worries and tell me he was only trying to find a business, invest the money so we didn't ever go broke. I readily agreed with him, but instead of improving, it got worse. Mario was spending weeks outside the house and only came back home with the intention to get some change of clothes, and he was out again. And over the next 2 years, it got completely worse that Mario would be gone for months, leaving me no money to fend for myself. He acted like I didn't exist and would not even pick my calls or show up, and it went on for months. I had no qualifications, so I had to start working at a bar just to feed myself. Mario was completely ignoring me, and the last time I saw him had been 5 months ago when he came to sell the apartment we stayed in, knowing I had nowhere else to go. He told me that he lost all the money and he needed money. We fought really hard that day, and Mario had hit me countless times that day because I refused to let him sell the apartment. It was the first time in all my years of life that I was being hit that way. Mario told me that he was going to give me some of the money before, but that he was going to now sell the house and not give me a dime. I couldn't believe my luck. I cried so hard that day, remembering just what I had sacrificed to be with him. Mario did as he said. He sold the apartment, and the new owners chased me out, and he just simply disappeared. I had to scout with a new friend I made, and I worked really hard to save up enough money to go back home. I wanted to go back home and beg for forgiveness, hoping that Ted would forgive me and take me back. But that was not the case when I got back home. Everybody in the town totally acted like they've never seen me before. My parents wouldn't even let me in their house to stay. They chased me out and told me they only had a son, which was Ted, and 2 grandkids, but not a daughter. I knew that they were just angry, and so I rented out a small room on the outskirts of town, and I've been going every day to see Ted and the kids, but Ted completely ignores me just like everybody else does. He acts like I'm a total stranger, even though I'm still his wife legally. He wouldn't even give me the chance to speak, and when I asked for the kids, he said nothing about them too. I've been going back and forth between my part-time job and going to see Ted, who acts like I don't exist, for about a month now, and none of those trips have been successful. I know I did a terrible thing choosing my lover over my family, and I wanted them to know how sorry I am, but nobody wants to hear me out. Everybody treats me like trash, and I feel really terrible for having abandoned them, but nobody is giving me the chance to fix it. I want to be with my husband and children again. I want to be able to live on the farm again. I hate this life that I have to live now. Please, guys, how do you think I can fix this? How can I get Ted to forgive me and accept me back? Update. Hello, Reddits. I've always thought that being able to make decisions was the best thing to ever happen to me. When I made that decision to marry Ted when I was only 19, I thought I was on top of the world. When I had our kids, I could make decisions like what color I wanted in their rooms, what kinds of clothes I wanted them to wear, what type of school they had to attend. When I got to make those decisions, I thought it was just the best gift ever, being able to make decisions. It made me feel powerful at the time, that I was able to decide for myself and also my kids, and sometimes my husband too. But now I realize that giving me the power to make decisions on my own was the most awful thing I could have ever done to myself. Because at the end of the day, I ended up making the wrongest of all decisions when I was left to decide things for myself. I decided to be happy, and that path of happiness I chose to have followed has now led into a path of destruction. I should have stuck with my family. I should have realized that there was nothing Mario could offer me that could ever replace the one Ted built for us. I should have understood the fact that there was no happiness out there without my kids. I've only realized too late now that everything is done, all gone like nothing. I've managed to erase myself from the lives of my kids and my husband, and I've done that completely. Seeing my kids 3 days ago and calling their names, thinking they would come rushing to hug and kiss their mother, who left them like they didn't matter, only for them to turn and continue laughing with their friends like I wasn't there at all. They totally ignored me and left quickly after that. It has now dawned on me just how much damage I've done to myself. I wasn't thinking. I was stupid, selfish, and crazy. I didn't think at all. I wasn't thinking of my kids when I left them 5 years ago. I wasn't thinking of Ted, who had tried so hard to make everything work for us. I wasn't thinking about my next 5 years either when I left. Because if I had been thinking about those things, I would never have left the way I did to pursue dust with a man who could easily be my younger sibling. Being ignored totally by everybody, especially my family and by Ted and the kids, hurt so badly. I realized just how selfishly I've acted. There were better things I could have done. I could have easily told Ted how I felt. He would have figured something out for us, he always did. I should have never pretended with Ted when all he ever showed me was the truth and sincerity of his heart. I should never have thrown away what we had for a fleeting affair that has now not only left me with the consequences, but has landed me in this mess that I don't think I can ever get out of. Nothing hurts. Nothing at all hurts as much as being hated by your own husband and kids. I feel so horrible and ashamed of myself. I haven't been able to go back into the town since that day I saw the kids, and they totally ignored me. It made me realize just how badly I've ruined things. What kind of mother left her kids to grow up on their own, even though they claimed to be independent when they actually needed her the most? I left my responsibilities to someone else to fulfill those duties of teaching Rosa what menstrual period was all about and help her get through the pain. I left Sam to deal with his raging hormones and confusion as a young teenager. I left them when they needed me the most, and words cannot express how much hatred I feel for myself, for what I had done. I left Ted with 2 teens and his other responsibilities as a provider of the family. I left him to deal with it all. I didn't even understand the gravity of what I was doing until now, and I regret that it took me this long to see it, after becoming abandoned by everybody including Mario, whom I sacrificed everything for. The coward who wanted to run away with another man's money and wife. The coward who couldn't stick to his decision until the end. The coward who lost everything gambling. My children will never look at me with love anymore. They hate me. They hate me for discarding them as easily as I had done because of a man. Ted hates me too. He hates me for discarding everything we shared, just for a life with another man. I remember the way he had looked at me that day 5 years ago in his library, asking me if I'm choosing my lover over my family. I remember the way he held it in, angry but willing to let me go to be with my lover. I thought he was just letting me go because he understood how sad I was at home and how I needed to be happy. I thought he was letting me because he realized that he could never make me happy, but I was so wrong. Ted didn't let me go out of the goodness of his heart. He didn't sign that document because he was wishing me a good life with Mario. Ted wanted to show me that day that he would never fight for a woman who could easily discard everything for a man she just met. He wanted to make me realize that even if I did come back begging and groveling to come back home, he would never let me in. He wanted me to understand that he would never let me back into their lives again, but I was too blind to see it. I was too delusional to think of the consequences. I thought with a little coaxing and begging, Ted would be willing to accept me back. I thought that the kids would miss me so much that they would jump right into my arms and cry their hatred for me out. I thought that I could just settle right back in, but I guess I was just being very delusional. I left the kids to grow up themselves with their father's help into young adults without their mother. They weren't the same needy children they were when I gave birth to them. They were absolutely changed, and seeing them that day turned their heads to look at the person who was calling them across the street, only to realize it was me, and they turned their heads back like they never heard me, makes me realize just how much they've grown and changed. And that thought alone makes my head and heart hurt so badly. I wish so desperately that I can undo everything I've done in the last 5 years. I wish I could change that look on their faces when they see me. I wish that I wasn't that horrible wife and mother who left everybody hanging. I've come to realize each day how selfish and greedy I am. I literally left them to figure out how to cope without me. And now they've had 5 years of experience of doing without me. I come back trying to waltz back into their lives. I feel so terrible, and I wish there was a way for me to just undo everything. I regret my actions, and I know that I will forever be haunted by those decisions I made. The decisions I made without thinking about the consequences. Those decisions whose consequences are now coming back to me in full force. I must have forgotten the law of karma. I thought that I would escape it. I just kept thinking, and we all know now those thoughts have ended up becoming my nemesis. It's sad that this really is the end for me. The letter that sits heavily on the only table in my room is the final way of Ted getting rid of me out of their lives forever. I know that even though I cannot bring myself to sign the papers, I would have to eventually, because no matter what I do, Ted will never forgive me, and neither will my kids, and that fact alone cures me of every romantic thought of reunion I had in my head coming back here. I know that this is the end of my life. I will have to continue as this sad, depressed woman with nothing attached to her name, no husband, no kids, no family, and no friends. I know that the future promises nothing but pain, however dreadful that sounds. I know you guys don't care what I do with my life from henceforth. Your comments clearly denoting exactly how you feel about my feelings. This is my last post here, and I sure hope that you guys will definitely learn something from me. Goodbye, guys.